The best leaders make everyone around them better. Effective communication and soft skills shows you how they do it. We will focus on what it says about communication and skills. Stay with me, the best part is near the end. Chapter 1 to 16. The various features of interpersonal communication discussed. Another special feature of the book is the accompanying practice material with 5 sets of model question papers. Guidelines for answering the questions are also provided, along with solutions to some of the difficult problems. Thus, it can be very well stated that this is not just a textbook dealing with soft skills and hard skills, but is a complete manual for the development of a balanced personality, required for an all-round success in the current scenario. 1. Soft skills. Growing importance. After reading this chapter, you will be familiar with concept of soft and hard skills, categories of skills, the importance of soft skills, process of skill acquisition, soft skills education and training. Chapter 2. Introduction. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Charles Darwin's words are still as relevant today as when they were first expressed during the early phase of the 19th century. Indeed, his words are more relevant now than ever before. The explosion of modern information technology poses a great challenge to the youth. As a result, there is an increasingly emergent competitive global picture. In order to prosper and succeed in the era of technological advance, individuals and organizations have to be ready to develop and adopt new skills and approaches. Otherwise, the chances of their survival may be at stake. Soft skills are the emotional sine qua non of psychological survival. Hence, they are the prerequisites to anyone who seeks a job. Soft skills also represent one of the fundamental attributes that the new knowledge-based economy seems to be demanding of the employers, employees, and organizations. The educational scene in India is currently witnessing some upheavals. The challenges and demands that are placed on students are voluminous. They experience psychological ramifications due to the lack of skills. These skills are of 2 kinds, namely, soft skills and hard skills. Although both the skills are deemed equally essential, soft skills should be the part and parcel of any course curriculum in view of its importance. Soft skills are essential not only for students, but also for teachers and other academic consultants. Students seek employment at some point in life to advance into professional phase and to earn their bread and butter. It will not only be desirable but also essential for them to learn the aspects of soft skills. We know that teachers generally teach us how to solve a specific or complicated mathematical problem. They explain complex concepts in a manner that is easy to understand. However, it is witnessed that many teachers or academicians fail to teach us how to communicate, how to get along well in an interpersonal situation, how to make a career choice, and many such related problems. All these aspects fall under the domain of soft skills. On the other hand, some teachers are extremely good at teaching the prescribed material. They confine themselves only to teaching. However, they lack interpersonal skills like greeting students, communicating empathy, showing care and concern, helping students to grow, and to develop proactive and other related skills, counseling skills from a cluster of soft skills. It is imperative to examine what exactly soft skills are, how they differ from hard skills, and why they are important to students. Primarily, however, let us look at the different aspects hard skills. Chapter 3: Hard skills. Hard skills are the technical competencies that an individual possesses. These are skills which are gained through educational learning and practical hands-on applications. Hard skills are quantitative in nature and can be measured. For example, Ravi, a 10th standard student, can do any complicated mathematical problem within no time. Sita, a 10th standard student, has a very good grasp over the concepts of science. Even she can solve complex problems very easily. Ravi S. and Sita S. skills in mathematics and science drive them to choose careers in engineering and medicine, respectively. Both their skills in engineering medicine can be termed as hard skills, which they have acquired through learning over a period of time. In other words, hard skills are essentially the technical abilities required to do a particular job or to perform a specialized task. A degree, diploma, or certificate confirms that the relevant abilities necessary to perform a particular job have been sufficiently mastered. Hard skills are vital to get employed. However, hard skills alone might not be sufficient in order to survive successfully. Soft skills are important in addition to hard skills. While the term hard skills or technical skills is a relatively straightforward concept, soft skills are somewhat more difficult to pin down, referring as they do to a very diverse range of abilities. Let us examine these aspects of soft skills. Chapter 4: Soft Skills. In contrast to hard skills, soft skills are generally interpersonal competences and are more difficult to define due to their subjectivity, which consequently makes them difficult to measure. Typically, included in the ambit of the soft skills are the following: listening skills, communication skills, team building skills, leadership skills, problem solving skills, time management skills, persuasion skills, negotiation skills, analytical thinking skills, conflict management skills, assertiveness skills, feedback skills, counseling skills, presentation skills, mentoring, flexibility, self-awareness. The above list of soft skills presents issues related to human capital. For example, Ravi, A.B. Tech graduate from Indian Institute of Technology, has problems in being assertive and is generally bullied by his friends. While Sita's professional skills are far more superior, she has difficulty in managing her time. Ravi's non-assertiveness and Sita's inefficient time management can both be regarded as a lack of soft skills being detrimental to their professional and personal success. Soft skills are as important and often even more important than technological skills for an individual to succeed. One can achieve synergy if one can combine both hard and soft skills. Chapter 5: Categories of Skills. 1. Skills and their types. The Expert Panel on Skills, in its report on skills and opportunities in the knowledge economy, March 2000, divided skills into 5 categories. They include the technical or hard skills referred above, and then 4 categories of soft skills. According to the panel, soft skills encompass the following: essential skills. Each and every student must possess the essential skills in order to strive and to survive in the competitive world. It is needless to mention that reading and writing are the most essential and fundamental soft skills through which all the students acquire competence. The onus lies on the teachers to help the students develop their potential for thinking, analyzing, and developing problem-solving skills. Exercises, practice situations, and role plays that address these essential soft skills in addition to regular curriculum will be instrumental in developing the personality of the students. Management skills. Managerial skills include the ability to manage people, capital, and budgets, as well as the ability to undertake organizational activities such as planning, marketing, and evaluation. Managerial skills are essential for teachers and academic administrators. For an administrator or a school principal whose responsibility lies in managing the rest of the staff, the managerial skill is immensely important. Leadership skills. The ability to motivate and assist others to achieve their full potential, to take risks and to formulate a vision comes under the purview of leadership skills. These skills are essential for both teachers and students. Teachers play a great role in helping students to acquire these skills. Contextual skills. The ability to operate successfully in different settings, such as different countries, different regions or a culturally diverse workplace is a contextual skill. The authors of the above-mentioned report are careful to make the point that while technical skills are necessary by themselves, they are not sufficient for commercial success in the contemporary scenario. Chapter 6: The Importance of Soft Skills. In a survey of 400 employers concerning their perceptions of workplace, basic skills, and competencies required for current and potential employees, the employers explained that they wanted entry-level workers to possess employability skills rather than technology competencies. To them, the most important skills, rating over percent, were basic skills, thinking skills, personal quality skills, and interpersonal competencies. Technology competencies and systems competencies rated the lowest at percent respectively, Richens and McLean 2000. In another study, employers identified a lack of soft skills, general social skills that includes actions or behavioral patterns like calling to inform if one is going to be late or absent, staying on the job despite frustrations, etc., as the primary barrier to employment, Owen et al. In engineering, for example, communication skills are often considered more important than high-level mathematics, group work skills are more important than academic individuality, and a commitment to lifelong learning and continuing professional development more important than a theoretical contribution to research-focused projects and development. Soft skills are very important to students for various reasons. Some of them are outlined below: to handle interpersonal relations, to choose career and make appropriate decisions, to communicate effectively. An investment in students' soft skills ultimately affects the bottom line by building new knowledge in the student. Relationships play a vital role in human life. In today's fast-paced and continually changing technology, hard skills are continuously in need for being updated. A student who has interpersonal problem and another who has difficulty in making a choice about his career suffers from lack of soft skills. Hence, the need is for a continuous renewal of soft skills in terms of teaching and training the students. This will facilitate their potential towards being effective and successful. According to Daniel Coleman, emotional intelligence, or EQ, referring to a combination of competencies that contribute to a person's ability to manage himself or herself and relate to other people, matters twice as much as IQ or technical skills in job success. Not only does it create happier and more successful employees, according to Coleman, it also helps create more successful companies. The results of one study on the opinion of the importance of soft skills indicated that the single most important soft skill for a candidate in a job interview to possess was interpersonal skills. This was followed by written or verbal communication skills and the ability to work under pressure. Technical skills and knowledge were found to be at the bottom of the list. It is interesting to note that another larger survey done in the US in 1998 indicates that more than two-thirds, 68%, interviewed, rated soft skills as very important compared to less than half, 46%, rating soft skills as very important in 1996. It is clear then that there are forces at play, which are changing the face of the working environment and leading to an increased emphasis on the deployment of soft skills at all levels of the management, irrespective of any organization. Chapter 7: The Learners and the Learning. The learners in the traditional educational setting predominantly constitute students preparing for a career. The learning system focuses on classroom-based students and overarches the design and operation of the teaching. The courses are designed to provide a depth and breadth of knowledge, the relevance of which may not be fully understood by the students. The students are also aware that the possible application of any knowledge gained is at a distant horizon, leading to a perception of low relevance that results in low motivation. Their focus frequently shifts to the skills that are likely to yield higher grades and percentages as an immediate objective. Hence, Skills related to examination techniques acquire importance, though there are not many situations in life that resemble the typically artificial nature of an academic assessment system. This kind of traditional learning system does not focus on the importance of soft skills. Hence, a major shift in the attitudes of the policymakers is necessary. Chapter 8: Soft skills are prerequisite for a teacher. The greatest potential for growth of an academic institute is its teaching community. To be an effective teacher, one should have both hard and soft skills. Possessing good soft skills will always strengthen teachers' confidence. Such teachers can prepare their students such that they learn to face the challenges of life better. Teaching is an emotional job, as it deals with teaching not only the academic material but also with the personal issues of the students. To inculcate soft skills in students, teachers themselves should be equipped with soft skills. One of the most vital soft skills required by a teacher is communication. To communicate is to write, to persuade, to train, to present, to inspire, to inform, to entertain, and to teach. In addition to communication, soft skills such as mentoring and coaching are the essential prerequisites of a teacher. A mentor is an experienced and trusted advisor. When asked who the most favorite teacher is, the image of that teacher who exhibits concern for students comes to mind than the teacher who is an expert in the subject. The reason is that he was not only an excellent teacher, but also made a lasting impression upon the students with her concerns, warmth, empathy, positive regard and communication. In times of crisis, the teacher became a counselor. When a student is confronted with the dilemma to choose a career, the teacher helps him take a decision. There could be many teachers who have taught with great repute or explained difficult concepts with great ease. But it is only that teacher who has exhibited a warm passion for students, who often comes to our mind whenever we are a little nostalgic about school days. This is simply because of his or her excellent soft skills. Chapter 9: Role of teachers in inculcating soft skills in students. Teachers play a significant role in the transition phase of students' lives. This phase prepares the students for their adult life. It involves continuous teaching and supporting a student's growth and ability to handle the demands of this complex world. A key to the whole concept of transition is that while instruction is critical, it ultimately needs to be transferred into real-life settings in order to prepare the student for success beyond the classroom. To help achieve these outcomes, teachers work with students to set short-term goals, which are steps to prepare students for what they want to do after graduation. Teachers need to follow the student's school career to set goals and determine the activities, which will help students to achieve them. Transition actually commences in the school years of a student. Hence, many of the critical skills are taught while in school, including not only academic skills but also soft skills such as social skills, teamwork, taking responsibility, following directions, attitude, and good attendance. Beginning at age 14, teachers should address transition planning, preparing the student for what or how he or she will be performing as an adult. Chapter 10: Skill Acquisition. Soft skills come naturally to some people, or they can be learnt and consequently applied in practice. Let us examine the process of skill acquisition. Guthrie, 1952, defined a skill as the ability to bring about some result with maximum certainty and minimum outlay of energy or of time and energy. Skill acquisition is an essential component of any learning system. The development of a skill, from playing basketball to resolving a conflict, will progress in levels of achievement. An individual will begin by struggling through attempts to perform the skill. In time, success and improved confidence will ensue. With enough practice, a person can become an expert in the performance of the desired skill. It has been described that this progression occurs through 4 steps. Figure 4 steps towards achievement of desired skill described further. A person can begin to learn a skill with no concept of it, and no ability to perform it. With some teaching and/or practice, the individual becomes aware of the skill and its goal, but still cannot perform the skill with any significant success. With vigorous teaching and practice, the skill is acquired and can be performed well, with higher levels of concentration. More practice positions the person to the highest level of function in which the skill can be performed with great success and without the need to concentrate intently. At this point, as one understands, the skill has become very repetitious. There are a great number of examples to illustrate this point. A child learning how to walk is an obvious case. At the earliest stages, the child will rise to its feet, will stagger and fall, and attempt again to rise and make a move. It does not know how to perform the skill and has no knowledge of how to improve. It is unconsciously incompetent. With more attempts, the child begins to realize the potential to walk or move, but is unable to perform the skill to any significant extent. With still more practice, the child can move about, but only with significant concentration. If it is distracted from its intent, it will quickly stagger and fall. In time, the skill becomes second nature and can be performed without conscious intent. The child has now become unconsciously competent. New skills are added in progression. The child will begin to run only to meet with a new series of challenges. Over the course of skill acquisition, the child will learn to run while catching and throwing, followed by more complex skills. At the highest level, very skilled athletes perform seemingly impossible tasks with relative ease. Just as the instance of learning to walk, further examples can be taken into consideration, like training the thinking system to resolve conflict, to overcome non-assertiveness, to improve communication requires time, patience, and many repetitions. One school of thought vehemently argues that soft skills are innate and cannot be learned. The other school of thought holds the view that soft skills can be learned. Addressing the controversy whether soft skills are innate or not is a baffling issue and beyond the scope of this chapter. However, it is important to remember that acquiring soft skills needs tremendous effort on the part of the learner. Chapter 11: Soft Skills Education and Training. Those who impart education and training should take action and expand programs to include the training of soft skills. Another important consideration is that the training of hard skills is easier to define, and the returns of technical training are perhaps more immediately apparent. As a result, it is much easier to ascertain whether someone has mastered a topic in mathematics than ascertaining whether he has learnt appropriate listening skills. The training of soft skills is generally more nebulous and requires a considerable investment of time to acquire efficiency. The training begins with topics such as listening skills, assertiveness skills, conflict management skills, communication, and other interpersonal skills should likewise be included in the course curriculum. Hence, teaching, training, evaluation, and a considerable follow-up of soft skills have to be integrated in the learning system. This process helps the students to develop psychological well-being. The case for improving soft skills is compelling, although it is worthwhile to remember that they are not a replacement for hard or technical skills. They are, in many instances, complementary, and serve to unlock the potential for highly effective performance in people qualified with the requisite hard skills. What is certain, though, is that soft skills will be taking on an increasingly important role in organizations across all sectors of the economy. It would seem that, given the nature of training required to develop effective soft skills, it may be necessary to start such training from the earliest years of schooling, and continue to expand them throughout all levels of education. Chapter 12: Summary. Due to the evolving nature of information technology, organizations and academic institutions have included soft skills as part of their curriculum. Hard skills are the technical competencies, which are gained through educational learning and practical hands-on application. Soft skills are also interpersonal competencies and are as important as hard skills. According to the expert panel on skills, 4 categories of soft skills are essential skills, management skills, leadership skills, and contextual skills. Soft skills are very important for students in handling interpersonal relations, choosing a career and making appropriate decisions, and communicating effectively. Teachers play a significant role in inculcating soft skills such as communication skills, assertiveness skills, and conflict resolution skills. Chapter 13. Introduction. Expression is the basic tenet of human communication. It is generally achieved either through signs or speech or by the method of writing. In order to express what we need, our signs, speech or writing should be meaningful. In other words, our communication should be effective, otherwise we fail to receive what we want. All means of communication should therefore be clear enough to stimulate action. Poor communication will only result in poor response. Communication is employed extensively in the process of all types of interactions: social, educational, and official. According to Edgar Dale, communication is a two-way sharing process, not a movement along a one-way track. To communicate is to make an idea common to 2 or more persons. The analysis of the statement from the point of view of teaching will mean that 1. The communicator himself should be thoroughly acquainted with what he is going to teach. 2. The receiver's audience should be equally interested in what is going to be taught to them. And 3. The process of stimulation should be heavily relied upon by the communicator. To communicate with one another is a compulsive human need. Mutual understanding is the core of human relations. It cannot take place without communication. Man is not only a social animal but also a communicating being. He is empowered with the ability to express thoughts in words. Communication is the story of man and his efforts to express effectively. Without the aid of communication, civilization and culture would not have progressed to this extent. The word communication is derived from the Latin word communis, which means common. Precisely, it connotes a common ground of understanding. It is the transmission of an interaction between facts, ideas, opinions, feelings, or attitudes. Communication is an interdisciplinary concept and can be approached from various disciplines such as psychology, education, management, linguistics, and human resources, etc. The process of communication involves sorting, selecting, and sending of symbols in such a way so as to help the listener perceive and formulate in his mind the meaning that exists in the mind of the communicator. Chapter 14. Some definitions of communication. Communication is too broad a term to define. It is defined, understood, and used in different ways by people from different walks of life. Let us consider how researchers working on communication have formulated the various definitions of communication. The interchange of thought or information to bring about mutual understanding and confidence or good human relation. The American Society of Training Directors communication is an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions by 2 or more persons. Communication is also defined as intercourse by words, letters, symbols, or messages, and as a way that one organization member shares meaning and understanding with another. Newman and Summer communication is the sum of all the things one person does when he wants to create understanding in the mind of another. It involves a systematic and continuous process of telling, listening, and understanding. Alan Louis A. Communication refers to a special kind of patterning, Patterning, which is expressed in symbolic form. For communication to take place between or among people, two requirements must be met. 1. A symbolic system must be shared by the people involved. We need to speak the same language or jargon or dialects. And 2. The associations between the symbols and their reference must be shared. Myers and G. Myers. The question to be asked of any administrative process is, how does it influence the decisions of the individuals without communication? The answer must always be, it does not influence them at all. Simon. It can be seen that each of the definitions of communication seems to be self-sufficient. Though there is no consensus on a singular, categorical, and comprehensive definition of communication, it is evident that there is an overlap of constructs. Transmission and interchange of cognitions, emotions and feelings, and process of listening and understanding are the two integral and key components of the definition of communication. Chapter 15. Dimensions of communication. Communication has four broad dimensions, namely intrapersonal, interpersonal, group, and mass communication. Each of these dimensions contributes to the process of developing good communication skills. The role of these dimensions in the educational setting cannot be underscored. Let us briefly examine these dimensions. Intrapersonal communication. It is very interesting to know what goes on in the minds of people as they think, feel, value, react, imagine, and so on. The statement we communicate to ourselves may sound silly. However, it cannot be neglected as a fact. Language is nothing but subvocal speech. Communication is an ongoing and unending process, and it continuously takes place within us irrespective of whether we do or do not have an audience before us. This dimension is termed as intrapersonal and has been the subject of psychological and cognitive studies, which attempt to learn how people respond to information and how they make decisions or store and retrieve data in their brains. It has also examined how bias, love, hatred, or even apathy can affect human interaction. In developing a theory of meaning, Vernon Cronin and others write about what they call coordinated management of meaning, which necessarily starts inside people's symbol processing centers interpersonally. The locus of meaning is intrapersonal. While the locus of action is interpersonal, it is not possible to study one without the other. How an academician forms perceptions about himself and the role of this self-perception in developing self-esteem is the domain of intrapersonal communication. How a communicator perceives himself/herself, how he estimates his self-worth, and the way he/she talks to herself/himself, positively or negatively, is heavily reflected in interpersonal communication. In other words, it is a reflection of interpersonal communication. Do students like teachers who perceive themselves as inadequate persons or have low self-esteem? A teacher who is confident and has positive self-esteem may be liked by his students well. Similarly, a student who is not confident may not be able to respond to the questions of the teachers without any anxiety. Students who are more confident would take the initiative of standing before a crowd or in an assembly and deliver a lecture. In these kinds of instances, teachers are to identify those who have problems in intrapersonal communication and extend the desired help to the students so that they overcome them. Meichenbaum, a cognitive behavioral therapist, has done extensive work and named his method as self-instructional training. He holds the view that the way one instructs or talks to oneself can be modified. His research has proved that negative self-talk can be translated into positive self-talk. Intrapersonal communication is the first step towards interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is a transaction between people and their environment, which includes other individuals such as friends, family, children, co-workers, and even strangers. Communication is now seen as a transaction in which both parties are active. The parties are not necessarily equally active. That is more likely in the case of interpersonal communication, less so in the case of mass media and their audiences, but the transaction is in some way functional to both parties. Information follows both ways to a greater and a lesser degree. As mentioned earlier, interpersonal communication is a reflection of intrapersonal communication. The converse can also hold true. Sometimes problems in interpersonal communication result in problems related to intrapersonal communication. A teacher may approach the principal to seek approval for leave. The principal may refuse to sanction the leave. The teacher might then get involved in a verbal confrontation with the principal. The issue might remain unresolved as the teacher is expected to a class at that very moment. He, thus, starts perceiving himself as powerless, broods over the issue, and fails to attend to his students. It is observed that most people who write about interpersonal communication appear to insist that the more communication one has, the better his/her relations will be. However, more may not always be better. It is also seen by researchers that how people see each other, interpersonal perceptions, may have a significant effect on how those individuals interact. What happens in interpersonal communication involves so much more than words that we must pay careful attention to people's habits of relating to each other if we are to be effective in either studying about or participating in these transactions. Group communication. Not all communication theorists agree on a definition of small group communication. How many people make up a group? What differences there are between dyads and other number of people in communication, etc. The field of group dynamics, however, represents a very interesting and special case of communication. It involves theories of leadership and management, small group discussion, and decision-making. A number of exercises and activities involving group dynamic, group discussion, leadership, and management principles are part and parcel of any academic setting. There is no way you can interact in your class without applying or taking into account the principles of group interaction. A teacher and an academic consultant play a vital role in enhancing group interaction and group communication. Every teacher invariably handles a group of students. It is essential for him to understand group communication and group dynamics. Teachers need to pay careful attention to group communication, which is a very sensitive issue. Therefore, any issues related to the group as a whole, such as strike or boycott, is to be handled sensitively. Similarly, when a group of teachers represents something to the principal, the issue has to be taken seriously and given due cognizance. Group communication in the academic setting cannot be ignored in view of its relevance and importance. Mass communication. One of the most popular areas of study in the recent times is that of the mass media or communication, as the term is used in sometimes to indicate a broadened view of what was once termed simply as journalism. At one time it was believed that audiences were a sort of homogeneous group, which could be reached through a media source. This very simplified view of audiences was useful to some mass media practitioners but did not explain how complicated the process of communicating and the character of audiences are. While mass media study is beyond the scope of our chapter, there are many ties between interpersonal communication and mass communication. One-way transmission over mass media is no longer the only way to view information. As the significance of two-way, or interactive, communication grows, people studying and working in mass media will have to take into account many of the theories and principles of interpersonal communication, and merging of such fields of study is not too far away. Each of the above detailed dimensions individually or collectively contributes to the academic field in terms of understanding and sharpening communication. Chapter 16. Communication Sequence. Communication sequences are punctuated while communication events are continuous transactions. They're in no clear-cut beginning or end. As participants or observers of communication, we divide this continuous, circular process into causes and effects of stimuli and responses. That is, we segment this continuous stream of communication into a number of smaller pieces and label some of these causes or stimuli and other effects or responses. Let us consider an example of a situation where the students are indifferent and the teacher does not prepare for the class. Figure A illustrates the sequence of events in which there is no absolute beginning and end. Each action, the student's indifference and the teacher's lack of preparation, stimulates the other. Each serves as the stimulus for the other, but there is no initial stimulus. Each of the events may be regarded as stimuli and as responses, but there is no way to determine their specificities. Now, consider how the teacher might divide up this continuous transaction. Figure B illustrates the teacher's perception of this situation. From her point of view, the teacher sees the student's indifference as the stimulus for her own lack of preparation. This is seen as the response to the student's indifference. In Figure C, we see how the students might see this same sequence of events, beginning with the teacher's lack of preparation as the stimulus, or cause, and their own apathy as the response, or effect. If communication is to be effective, if we are to understand what the other person means from his or her point of view, then we have to see the sequence of events as punctuated by the other person, that is, empathy. Further, we have to recognize that our punctuation is not a reflection of what exists in reality, but is a reflection of our own unique but fallible perception. Chapter 17: Models of Communication. Many influences and models have shaped the field of human communication. Communication not only is at the heart of humanity but is also the vehicle of our intentions towards each other. It is only through communication that we can realize our social potential. Without communication, we would all be evolutionary misfits. Before taking stock of the present understanding of the process of human communication, it will be useful to review briefly the major threads that run through the various approaches to the study of human communication. Figure the sequence of events. The action view. The Boole-SI theory. The information theory perspective shares the view that communication consists of a one-way act, like shooting an arrow into a target. You hit the Boole-SI, you either get close or you miss. The whole activity of communication is centered on the one-way action of doing something to someone. How good you are depends mostly on how well you shoot the arrow, or how well you make your point. The emphasis is on the sender and her encoding skills. This means that how you construct a message, organize it, or deliver it, is just as crucial as sharpening your arrow, testing its feathers, flexing your bow, and shooting straight. Another important aspect of this concept is that words actually have meanings. Therefore, if the sender knows the meaning of the words, the same meaning would be sent directly to the receivers like a pipeline. In the simplistic view, misunderstandings would occur only if people did not know what words meant. Further, if misunderstandings did occur, you would look to the way the speaker communicated to find the error. This view pays more attention to tools and skills than to the more potentially important aspects of communicating. It does not spend much time analyzing the reasons, except that somewhere along the line you used the wrong words, did not organize your message well enough, did not possess a good voice, did not possess enough credibility, as though credibility were a quality that a speaker could own. In essence, you did not shoot straight at your target and therefore missed a little. This view is still quite widely believed, especially by those who sell their expertise to people on speaking success, which promises to make one an overnight success in the field of communication if one follows a few simple rules of delivery. The interaction view. The ping-pong theory. Another favorite way of looking at communication is to compare it with taking turns in a table tennis match. You say something, I answer. You say more, I reply. I serve, you respond. We take turns at being the sender and the receiver. This view accounts for more complexities of human communication than the Boole-SI theory. It does include the receiver by adding the concept of linear feedback, which permits the sender to exert more control over his or her communication. Yet, the communication process is still oversimplified by being treated as a process of linear cause and effect sequence. I speak, you answer. The weakness in this view is that communication is not divided into ping and pong, stimulus and response, shot and return, action and reaction. Senders and receivers do not simply alternate in sending and receiving, and the simple linear model of cause and effect is inadequate to explain the complexities of communication. This is an ineffective model of communication from the academic point of view. The transaction view, the spiral theory transactional communication signifies that there is more than a simple interaction between senders and receivers. A transaction implies interdependency and mutual reciprocal causality among the parts of a system. Human communication, like any dynamic process, is best understood as a system where senders and receivers simultaneously change their roles. Communication is not the static picture-like view of still photography. It resembles more of a continuous flow of motion pictures. Communication viewed as a process is characterized less by the actions of a sender and the subsequent reactions of a receiver than by the simultaneity of their reciprocal responses. Who starts the process is an irrelevant question, since processes have no specific beginning or end. Any communicative behavior that we want to isolate for the purpose of analysis has a history and a future. They have lived in many places. They have said many things before, possibly to each other. In a transactional view of communication, you are the cause and effect, stimulus and response, sender and receiver. Not only are you the product of your previous communicative behaviors, but also equally importantly what you see yourself to be is in a large measure affected by how you perceive others to behave towards you, that is, how you perceive others' communication. Your perception of other people's responses is itself the product of previous perceptions of previous responses, a lifetime of previous communication. To view communication as a transaction does more justice to the complexities of the process than any other conceptualization we know. Chapter 18: The Process of Communication. It is abundantly clear that communication is the lifeblood of any institute, organization, or a social structure. It includes the structure through which messages pass and the way information is presented, as well as the actual content of the message themselves. Whether you are speaking or writing, listening or reading, communication is more than a single act. It's a dynamic, transactional, two-way process that can be broken into 6 phases. The sender has an idea. You conceive an idea and want to share it. A teacher has been given the task of explaining a concept. He first reads the concept and then understands it. This is the first phase of the process of communication. The sender transforms the idea into a message. When you put your idea into a message that your receiver will understand, you are encoding, deciding on the message from word, facial expression, gesture length, organization, tone, and style, all of which depend on your idea, your audience, and your personal style or mood. Once the teacher understands the concepts, he translates it in his mind in the form of verbal structure or syntax. An active process of transforming the idea concept into a message is the second phase of the process of communication. The sender transmits the message. To physically transmit your message to your receiver, you select a communication channel, verbal or nonverbal, spoken or written, and medium, telephone, computer, letter, memo, report, face-to-face exchange, and so on. The channel and medium you choose depend on your message, the location of your audience, your need for speed, and the formality of the situation. Once the idea concept is given a shape in the mind, the immediate task would be to transmit the message. To do so, a communication channel is used, which involves both verbal and nonverbal communication. In the third phase of the process of communication, the teacher communicates the concept to his students. The receiver gets the message. For communication to occur, your receiver must first get the message. If you send a letter, your receiver has to read it before he can understand it. If you are delivering a speech, your audience has to be able to listen to you and pay attention. Once the teacher communicates the concept to his students, the students need to pay attention in order to listen and process the communication. The receiver interprets the message. Your receiver must cooperate by decoding your message, absorbing, and understanding it. The decoded message then has to be stored in the receiver's mind. If all goes well, the message is interpreted correctly. That is, the receiver assigns the same basic meaning to the words as you intended and responds in the desired way. Understanding of the concept follows by listening to it. Here the student makes an attempt to actively understand the concept. This understanding is nothing but interpretation according to communication researchers. The receiver reacts and sends feedback to the sender. Feedback is your receiver's response, the final link in the communication chain. After receiving the message, your receiver responds in some way and signals that response to you. Feedback is the key element in the communication process because it enables you to evaluate the effectiveness of your message. If your audience does not understand what you mean, you can tell by the response and refine your message. The student responds to and gives a feedback to the teacher either verbally or non-verbally. This is how the process of communication is completed. Figure illustrates how the process of communication is repeated until both parties have finished expressing themselves. The process is effective only when each step is successful. In other words, ideas cannot be communicated if any step in this process is skipped or is completed incorrectly. Figure repetition of the process of communication barriers. Even if these 6 steps are successfully completed, other hurdles may prevent a speaker from communicating effectively. Communication is successful only when the receiver understands the message as intended by the sender teacher. For example, noise is an interference in the communication process that distorts or obscures the sender's teacher's meaning. Communication barriers between people. When you send a message, you intend to communicate its meaning, but the message itself does not contain the meaning. The meaning exists in your mind and that of your receiver. To understand each other, you and your receiver must share similar meanings for words, gestures, tone of voice, and other symbols. Effective communicators do all they can to deal with barriers such as differences in perception and language, poor listening, emotional interference, cultural differences, and physical distractions. Let us look at each of these barriers in detail. Differences in perception and language. The world around us constantly bombards us with sights, sounds, and other characteristic elements. Our minds organize this stream of sensations into a mental map that represents our perception of reality. Even when 2 people have experienced the same event, their mental images of that event will not be identical. Because your perceptions are unique, the ideas you want to express may differ from that of the other people. As a sender, you choose the details that seem important to you, a process known as selective perception. As a receiver, you try to fit new details into your existing pattern. If a detail doesn't quite fit, you are inclined to distort the information rather than rearrange the pattern. Language is an arbitrary code that depends on shared definitions. However, There is a limit to how completely any two people can share the same meaning for a given word. Poor listening. Although most of us think we know how to listen, in actuality many of us are poor listeners. We all let our minds wander every now and then, as also we are especially likely to drift off when we are forced to listen to information that is difficult to understand or that has little direct bearing on our own lives. If we are tired or concerned about other matters, we are even more likely to lose interest. Emotional interference. It is difficult to shape a message when you are upset, hostile, or fearful. Your ideas and feelings often get in the way of being objective. Likewise, if the other person is emotional, he or she may ignore or distort your message. Although it is practically impossible to avoid all communication when emotions are involved, you should be alert about the greater potential for misunderstanding that accompanies emotional messages. Cultural differences. Communicating with someone from another country is probably the most extreme example of how different backgrounds and cultures may impede communication. In fact, it may be one of the hardest communication barriers to overcome, especially when your receiver's age, education, social status, economic position, religion, or life experience also differs substantially from yours. Figure shows how shared experience contributes to shared meaning and understanding. The portion of each diagram where the circles overlap represents the level of understanding between the sender and the receiver. Figure how shared experience affects understanding. Physical distractions. Communication barriers are often physical: bad connection, poor acoustics, and illegible copy. Although noise of this sort seems trivial, it can block an effective message. Your receiver might be distracted by an uncomfortable chair, poor lighting, health problems, or some other irritating condition. These annoyances do not generally block communication, but they may reduce the receiver's concentration. Chapter 19: The Basic Forms of Communication. Communication occurs in many forms. For example, Mr. Rao, the principal of a school, can pick up the phone and have a conversation with Mrs. Radhika, who is a science teacher. He can choose, instead, to write her a memo. In turn, she can respond to his message in the form of her choice. He may decide to forward her message to other employees, and they may communicate it to all the other teachers and other outsiders. The process is fluid. The form in which a message is communicated changes constantly. Communication can be formal or informal, spoken or written, and internal or external. Nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is the most basic form of communication. All the cues, gestures, facial expressions, and attitudes towards time that enable people to communicate without words are different forms of communication. Anthropologists theorize that long before human beings used words to talk things over, they communicated with one another through their bodily gestures. They gritted their teeth to show anger, they smiled and touched one another to indicate affection. Although we have come a long way since those primitive times, we still use nonverbal cues to express superiority, dependence, dislike, respect, love, and other such feelings. Most people deceive each other quite easily with their words, but since actions speak louder than words, their body language gives away their real intentions. Words are relatively easy to control. Body language, facial expressions, and vocal characteristics are not. By paying attention to these nonverbal cues, you can detect deception or affirm a speaker's honesty. Nonverbal communication differs from verbal communication in fundamental ways. For instance, it is less structured, and hence is more difficult to study. You cannot pick up a book on nonverbal language and master the vocabulary of gestures, expressions, and inflections that are common in our culture. Even experts do not really know how people learn nonverbal behavior. No one teaches a baby to cry or smile, Yet these forms of self-expression are almost universal. Nonverbal communication also differs from verbal communication in terms of intent and spontaneity. You generally plan your words. When you say, "Please get back to me once you finalize your annual report," you have a conscious purpose. You think about the message, if only for a moment. However, when you communicate nonverbally, you sometimes do so unconsciously. You don't mean to raise an eyebrow or to blush. Those actions come naturally. Without your consent, your emotions are written all over your face. Good communicators generally recognize the value of nonverbal communication and use it to enhance the communication process. One of the famous communication researchers, Virginia Johnson, holds the view that nonverbal communication is so reliable that people generally have more faith in nonverbal cues than they do in verbal messages. It can also be argued that nonverbal communication is not reliable. One may put forth a view that somebody may fake crying. However, it is very possible to differentiate a person who cries with agony and who fakes crying. You explain a complex concept to your students. In response to your question whether they have understood or not, some may respond verbally in terms of yes or no, and some may respond non-verbally by nodding their head. Do you straight away take them for granted that they have understood the concept? Or, can you make out fake non-verbal response? In the same way, it is equally possible to differentiate a vague smile and warm smile. Sometimes nonverbal communication alone may occur without verbal communication. Hence, one has to be very careful in interpreting nonverbal cues, as the meaning of nonverbal communication lies with the observer, who both reads specific signals and interprets them in the context of a particular situation and a particular culture. Chances are, if you can read other people's nonverbal messages correctly, you can interpret their underlying attitudes and intentions and respond appropriately. Nonverbal communication is important for another reason. When you have a conscious purpose, you can often achieve it more economically with a gesture than you can with words. A wave of the hand, a pat on the back, all are streamlined expressions of thought. Characteristics of nonverbal communication. Researchers have identified some characteristics of nonverbal communication. These may be found in all forms of nonverbal communication and should provide a kind of framework through which the specifics of nonverbal communication may be viewed. Nonverbal messages are characterized by being 1. Communicative, 2. Contextual, 3. Believable. Let us examine each of these characteristics briefly. Communicative nonverbal behavior in an interactive situation always communicates. This observation is true of all forms of communication, but it seems particularly true of nonverbal communication. Regardless of what one does not do, regardless of whether it is intentional or unintentional, one's nonverbal behavior communicates something to someone. Sitting silently in a corner and reading a book communicates to the other people in the room just as much as verbalization. Staring out of the window during the class communicates something to the teacher just as much as saying, "I am bored." The important difference between the nonverbal communication and the verbal statements here should be noticed. The student looking out of the window, when confronted by the teacher's question, "Why are you bored?" can always claim to be just momentarily distracted by something outside. Saying "I am bored," however, prevents the student from backing off and giving a more socially acceptable meaning to the statement. The nonverbal communication, however, is also more convenient from the point of view of the teacher. The teacher, if confronted with the student's statement "I am bored," must act on that in some way. Some of the possibilities include saying, "See me after the class, I am as bored as you are, who cares, why are you bored," and so on and so forth. All of them, however, are confrontations of a kind. The teacher is in a sense forced to do something even though he or she might prefer to ignore it. Even the less obvious and less easily observed behaviors communicate. The smaller movements of the eyes, hands, facial muscles, and so on also communicate just as much as do the gross movements of gesturing, sitting in a corner, or staring out of a window. These small movements are extremely important in interpersonal relationships. All nonverbal behavior, however small or transitory, is significant as each has a meaning, and each communicates. Contextual like verbal communication, nonverbal communication exists in a context, and that context helps to determine the meanings of any nonverbal behavior. The same nonverbal behavior may have a totally different meaning when it occurs in another context. A boy's wink of an eye to a beautiful girl in the school bus means completely different from a student's wink of an eye to another friend of the same gender. It signifies a put-on or a lie. Similarly, the meaning of a given bit of nonverbal behavior will differ depending on the verbal behavior it accompanies. When separated from the context, it is impossible to tell what any given bit of nonverbal behavior may mean. Sometimes, even if we know the context in detail, we still might not be able to decipher the meaning of the nonverbal behavior. Believable why we are quick to believe nonverbal behaviors when they contradict the verbal behavior seems to be an unanswered question till date. Consider, for example, a conversation between a teacher and a student. The student is attempting to get a good grade for the course and is in the process of telling the teacher how much hard work was put into the classes and how much enjoyment was derived from them. Throughout the discussion, however, the student betrays his or her real intentions with various small muscle movements, inconsistent smiles, a lack of direct eye contact, and so on. Somehow, the teacher goes away with the feeling, based on the nonverbal behavior, that the student really did not put in a good deal of work. For the most part, research has shown that when the verbal and nonverbal messages differ, we believe the nonverbal. Types of nonverbal communication. The types of nonverbal communication can be grouped into the following general categories. Facial expressions and eye behavior. Your face is the primary site for expressing your emotions. It reveals both the type and the intensity of your feelings. Your eyes are especially effective in indicating attention and interest, influencing others, regulating interaction, and establishing dominance. In fact, eye contact is so important that even when your words send a positive message, averting your gaze can lead your audience to perceive a negative one. Although the eyes and the face are usually reliable sources of meaning, people sometimes manipulate their expressions to simulate an emotion they do not feel or to mask their true feelings. Maintaining eye contact is not important in some cultures. In fact, it can be considered impolite. Gestures and postures. By moving your body, you can express both specific and general messages, some voluntary and some involuntary. Many gestures, a wave of the hand, for example, have a specific and intentional meaning, such as hello or goodbye. Other types of body movements are unintentional and express a more general message. Slouching, leaning forward, fidgeting, and walking briskly are all unconscious signals that reveal whether you feel confident or nervous, friendly or hostile, assertive or passive, powerful or powerless. Vocal characteristics like body language. Your voice carries both intentional and unintentional messages. On a conscious level, we can use our voices to create various impressions. Consider the sentence, "What have you been up to?" If you repeat that question 4 or 5 times, changing your tone of voice and stressing upon various words, you can convey quite different messages. However, your vocal characteristics also reveal many things that you are unaware of. The tone and volume of your voice, your accent and the pace of your speaking, and all the little ums and rs that creep into your speech say a lot about who you are, your relationship with the audience, and the emotions underlying your words. Personal appearance. Your appearance helps establishing your social identity. People respond to others on the basis of their physical appearance. Because you see yourself as others see you, these expectations are often a self-fulfilling prophecy. When people think you are capable and attractive, you feel good about yourself, and such a feeling affects your behavior, which in turn affects other people's perceptions of you. Although an individual's body type and facial features impose limitations, most people are able to control their attractiveness to some degree. Grooming, clothing, accessories, style all modify a person's appearance. If your goal is to make a good impression, adopt the style of the people you want to impress. Use of time and space. Time and space can be used to assert authority. Some people demonstrate their importance by making other people wait, others show respect by being on time. People can also assert their status by occupying the best space. Apart from serving as a symbol of status, space can determine how comfortable people feel talking with each other. When others stand too close or too far away, you are likely to feel ill at ease. Verbal communication. Although you can express many things non-verbally, there are limits to what you can communicate without the help of language. If you want to discuss past events, ideas, or abstractions, you need symbols that stand for your thoughts. Verbal communication consists of words arranged in meaningful patterns. To create a thought with these words, you arrange them according to the rules of grammar, putting the various parts of speech in the proper sequence. Once the syntax is formed in the mind of a person who communicates, he then transmits the message in spoken or written form, anticipating that someone will hear or read what you have to say. Therefore, language is the main aspect of verbal communication. To begin with, let us examine language as a symbol system. Language as a symbol system. Language may be thought of as the code, the system of symbols, utilized in the construction of verbal messages. Language may be defined as a specialized, productive system capable of displacement and composed of rapidly fading, arbitrary, culturally transmitted symbols. The 6 characteristics of verbal communication are: I. Specialization and productivity. 2. Displacement. 3. Rapid fading. 4. Arbitrariness. V. Cultural transmission. Specialization and productivity. Language is a specialized communication system and it produces creative responses and learned utterances. Introduction of new words is another dimension of productivity. Displacement. Human language can be used to talk about things that are remote in both time and space. One can talk about the past and the future as easily as the present. It has the ability to displace concepts, and sometimes statements uttered in one place today may have effects elsewhere tomorrow. Displacement, together with productivity, also makes possible the ability to lie. Rapid fading. Speech sounds fade rapidly, they are short-lived. They must be received immediately after they are emitted, or else they will not be received at all. Speech signals are probably the least permanent of all communicative media. Arbitrariness. Language signals are arbitrary. They do not possess any of the physical properties or characteristics of the things for which they stand. Names are largely arbitrary. There is no real relationship between the name and the individual. And yet, names are not totally arbitrary. Many names indicate the ethnic group to which an individual belongs and usually indicate sex. Cultural transmission. The form of any particular human language is culturally or traditionally transmitted. One of the consequences of cultural transmission is that any human language can be learned by any normal human being. All human languages are learnable. Language as meaning system. If it were not for the desire of one person to communicate a meaning to another person, language would probably not exist. Of all the functions of language, the communication of one person's meaning to another is surely the most significant. Consequently, meaning must be placed at the center of any attempt to explain language. Although a variety of types of meanings may be identified, two general types essential to identify in communication: denotation and connotation. The denotation of a word is its objective definition. The connotation of a word is its subjective or emotional meaning. In order to explain these two types of meanings, let us take an example of the word fail. To an examiner, this word might simply mean or denote that the student did not get 50 or more than 50. It is an objective description of a particular event. On the other hand, to the person who failed in the examination, the word means much more than getting 50 or more than 50. He or she recalls his or her preparation, stress involved in understanding the concepts, losing time, pain involved in preparing again for the exam, his or her classmates being promoted to another class, he or she remaining in the same class, and so on. To him or her, it is a highly emotional word, or a highly subjective word. These emotional or subjective or personal reactions are the word's connotative meaning. Denotative meanings are relatively unchanging and static. Although definitions of all words change through time, denotative meanings generally change very slowly. But the connotative meaning changes rapidly from person. Speaking and writing educationists have witnessed that people tend to prefer oral communication channels to written ones. In general, talking to somebody is quicker and more convenient than writing a memo or a letter. Furthermore, when you are speaking or listening, you can pick up added meanings from nonverbal cues and benefit from immediate feedback. Even though oral communication is the preferred medium, there are times when written communication is more appropriate and effective when the information you are conveying is very complex, when a permanent record is needed for future reference, when the audience is large and geographically dispersed, and when immediate interaction with the audience is either unimportant or undesirable. The most common types of written communication are letters, memos, reports, and proposals. Over the past few decades, technological advances have led to the development of electronic communication. Teleconferencing, email, and computer networks have revolutionized both oral and written communication and have become vital elements in achieving organizational goals. However, it is worth noting that each form of communication also has its limitations. Protocols must be followed, and individuals must learn when it is appropriate to use each form. Listening and reading are as important as speaking and writing. People spend more time receiving information than transmitting it. Most of us are not very good listeners. Immediately after hearing a 10-minute speech, we typically remember only half of what was said. A few days later, we have forgotten 3/4 of the message. Even worse, we often miss the subtle, underlying meaning entirely. To some extent, our listening problems stem from our education, or lack of it. We spend years learning to express our ideas, but few of us ever think of giving importance to the concept of listening. Nevertheless, developing better listening abilities is crucial for anyone in general. Reading, again, is a skill in itself. One is required to read and comprehend quite a number of times during one's student or professional life. Reading with improper articulation and understanding may lead to erroneous interpretations, which, in turn, may result in further complications. That is the heart of effective communication and soft skills. If it helped, a quick subscribe keeps more summaries coming. So how do communication and skills connect? That is exactly where we started. Go back to the top and watch it click into place.